freedom. It's not the first time that CDFG is launching such a report. For the past 20 years, we've been launching a report, documented one, about the media situation. What is new about it between the past years and this year? This year, we tried to develop an indicator, a new digital one, and this indicator will be revised and audited to see where are weakness points in order to enhance them. So we will start revising all this. We have launched an indicator about the Arabic region, but it would not continue it because of under the Arabic Spring. Restricted media, this is what we have reached in response to 57 questions. About 570 points. Every question from 0 till 10. Uh, so the
The
result
result
that
that
Jordan has
Jordan has
obtained is
obtained were
2 to 7.3 points.
227.3 in
Indicator
the
out of
indicate from
570 points.
570.
And
And this
this
was part
is
of the classification for the indicator, which means restricted. First, it is not free, restricted, slightly free, free. And this result might be better than the actual situation that we have seen as a result of the international indicators for the state of freedom of press or the democratic state in Jordan, because all of the indicators that were produced this year and the previous were classified as either a country that is not free or we don't have any freedom of press, such as Correspondents Without Borders, or why did have we been classified as restricted? That is slightly better for two clear reasons for us. The first reason is that in the legislative environment and the political environment, when we asked, does the Constitution provide guarantees for the freedom of the press and the freedom of expression? The result was in the different answers that was a positive outcome, which has improved the situation in the assessment and in the scores that this indicator has been awarded relatively so. And actually, in Article 15 of the Constitution, that has stipulated the enshrinement of the freedom of the press, and Article 28 by 1, which has set restrictions on the laws so as not to restrict the right. In principle and in theory, this is excellent, but in application, things are different. The second point in this matter relates to the violations. We have expanded in the part that relates to violations, and we've given it a lot, a big weight, because actually all what has been said in theory, legislations, and policies, if this matter was not accompanied by a safe environment for the journalists, then words would be of no value. So we have given a qualitative weight for the violations aspect. Under the violations, also you need to be careful that Jordan is not common in terms of severe violations. Fortunately, we don't have any killings, any kidnapping, any forced disappearance, and even the physical attacks occur in the protests area in particular, and mostly, and the arrests, that is the prohibition of freedom, and the arrests occur, and these are not numerous. However, they're not limited also. So the absence of the violations or the decline of severe violations and their limitedness contributed in improving the fact that we are in a restricted position. Otherwise, the result would have been different. I would like to say that the indicator has remedied five divisions: the political, legislative environment, the right to access information, the violations, the protection of journalists and impunity, the independence of the uh, media outlets. And if you look at the different departments, the political environment is restricted, legislative as well. The right to access information is restricted, violation slightly restricted, independence of the media outlets restricted, and the freedom of the media in the light of the pandemic restricted. We have produced an executive summary, which we has named it deductions and indications, conclusions. And I advise all my colleagues in the media and everyone concerned and all the human rights activists to read the reports fully as one integrated unit and not partially so. You can find it on the website, and the link will lead you to the website along with the different graphics and all the figures, and we are responsible for the whole text, and we are totally liable for it as a Center for the Freedom and Protection of Journalists. We're responsible for that. The last strategy that has been produced in 2011, 5 years, it has come to an end after the Arabic Spring. Following that, there was no strategy whatsoever. And even this strategy, nothing to be mentioned was achieved. Even when it comes to the legislative demands, it came contrary to what has mentioned in 2011, after which Tahir Adwan has resigned. The second point, the quick overview of the ministerial statements for the letters of assignments, the responses to that. Media was not present. It did not exist specifically. And every time the government were to mention the media in its ministerial statements, the result was just a general talk, not restricted, without a plan, without any measurement indicators. So all of this matter remained ink on paper. And this subject, it's important that if we were to develop and to conduct political reform and you're still talking about general things, we will not achieve anything. The third matter, the problem does not only reside in the legislations. The problem resides in the silence regarding the violations in a permanent and common manner. And as I remember, correct me, Mohammed, if I'm wrong, there isn't any official or any employee or any security officer that has been pursued for having intervened in the media. This does not exist at all. The security apparatus and the government intervene in the media outlets, whether they were private or public or affiliated to them continuously and permanently so. However, this intervention is not recent. A number of years ago, the interference was slight, except for certain hot issues, such as the teachers' issue. And then at the time, the directives and instructions were clear. The question is why? And the answer is clear because there was no longer any need to intervene because the media know what is permissible, what is not. It has its own line. What is more important is that the editing administrations do their job perfectly well. So there was no need to interfere or to at all. The journalists usually never or do not unveil what attacks they have been subject to. This is why we cannot claim that we have a conciliation, but there are threats, there are interferences, there are summons, but also they are not common. and they are not regular, and they take place when the containment policy no longer works, nor the policy of the stick and the carrot. This is what is utilized in the House of Representatives. I remember my colleague Omar Ayasra said that there is no approach for the subsequent Houses of Representatives in following up and supporting media, nor does the National Orientation Committee do that. On the contrary, among the journalists, it is believed that the House of Representatives is restricted and functions to pass the legislations that are restricted in agreement with the government. So we expect something to happen. Regarding the relation with the civil society, the relation is not a strong one, it's not a positive one. The media, sometimes some of the media outlets control the civil society. There is no understanding regarding the role. So we need to exert efforts on the legislative environment. Muhammad will be more elaborative, but I did live with the situation for more than 30 years, and I can assert one thing, that the subsequent governments have endeavored to transform all the legislations into a restrictive tool and have transformed the legal provisions or articles as minefields that no journalist can, even if professional, can maneuver himself or herself smoothly. You need to know this is taboo. This might affect national unity. This might encroach on the relation with the sisterly countries. So the legislations are surrounding you everywhere. The right to access information, Section 3. We were the first country to enact a law for the access to information in 2007. And for the last 14 years, the law on the ground is not enforced, the law is paralyzed, does not have the force of implementation due to the fact that it has not been given the feature of being prevalent over the other laws. We have conducted the study, and Muhammad was with us. We have more than 40 laws that include provisions regarding confidentiality. Imagine all the laws state that despite what has been stipulated in any other law, this law is be the applicable one, except for the law for the right to access information. They just said subject to legislations. Done with this. Now the government of Omar Razaz has formed a higher committee for enacting a draft law. I was a member in it. We have worked for a long time. Ms. Hala was amongst those with us, as Mr. Muhammad. We have produced a consensual project that was okay, not up to the expectation, but much better than it is. Then this project was sent to the Ministerial Council, and they somehow intervened in it by the LOB and took us back to square one. The project that has been sent to the House visitors does not represent us. And if there's been a fruit of such, we will stay where we are. But the problem does not only reside in the law. The problem resides in the implementation and enforcement. So far, the public institutions did not classify information. They did not develop mechanisms for enforcement. This is why I view with positiveness to the initiative of MOPIC as part of the context of the Open Transparent Government, the OGB, in that we could, in cooperation with MOPIC and the National Library, we have managed to approve 3 protocols. The first one for the enforcement, the second one for classification, the third one for information management. Now, if the Ministerial Council were to ratify this in December 2020 and has become applicable, if the public institutions were to apply these protocols, then they can improve. But this will require some control, some monitoring, an entity to monitor. And this is what we lack and what we seek. The violations are partly restricted, and we have explained why they are so. But I would like to remind you that the violations are not only in terms of the indicators, they are questions. We are daily monitoring every violation that occurs for the media. In 2020, the young men and young women at the center in Ain unit, X unit, have monitored 111 violations that were perpetrated against 56 journalists. You know that one case may include a number of violations. Just to understand the methodology, there might be blocking of information, attack, prevention of coverage. So one case may include 7 cases. So Haitham may be showing this on the slide. Once more, we say violations are usually not severe. What the most that has happened 2020 is the prevention of coverage during the parliamentary election. Let we remind you that in all the elections, in the first 4 or 5 hours, every time the directors of the voting centers, polling centers, prevent the journalists from taking pictures in isolation of the elections. And we used to send to the electorate commission to remind them of the necessity to refer in details about this to the director of the centers. And the Electoral Commission did train them and produced manuals, but these constitute part of the public officials that are utilized for the elections. And so often they do not respond, sometimes intentionally, sometimes non-intentionally. We said also, we, we said about the violations, and I believe that there is a quite an important matter. All of the protests in 2011, I've been monitoring them so far, have one common feature, which is that the employees assigned or tasked with enforcing the law do not have a protocol to use for dealing with the media. For the whole world, there is a protocol that says, stop here, this is your border here, you can take picture from here, you can see from here, but do not obstruct the management of operations in the area, but your rights are conserved and preserved. For us, this in the protest area, it's a moody thing, and if there's been any clashing, and if aggressive force or non-aggressive force was used with the protesters, the first people who pay the price are the journalists. They prevent them from taking pictures, they confiscate their cameras, their films, etc. So even though Jordan is well informed and knows about the UN documents for the employees tasked with enforcement of the law, and we have reminded the government with this more than once, but till now, nothing has been achieved in this regard. This is why we're telling the government and for the public defense, for the gendarmerie, for the army, for the intelligence, for all the security apparatus, that if we want to change the situation, there should be an agreement on a clear protocol. The independence of the media outlets. You do know that the media, if they're not independent, then they wouldn't have this honesty. For us, the media outlets, even they are private, are not allowed to have a space of autonomies. So they interfere in them. What we need to know that the tests of independence appears in the sensitive issues. Look as an example, the union of teachers, all the spaces granted for the media outlets, and at that very minute, and there will be a discourse that seems to be united. You read the same articles as if all they are one. You read certain news coverage as if they were during the inclusive reign. So what caused this weakness? What did is that we do not have a strong union that would protect the media. And the union of journalists, unfortunately, has been eroded, and its dependence is no longer complete, and it did not adopt any strong positions in advocating freedom. It was considered like an arm for the executive force to be utilized in many cases for this purpose. And this is why, and also it is not permissible to have multiple unions nor obligatory membership. In the words, they have established independent funds to support the media for confronting the newspapers' crises based on their belief that media, the independent media, the diversified media is one of the human rights to convey the information, the credible information to the society to ensure their political participation. For us, instead of the media begging for support and instead of being bought with legal announcements and governmental ones, there should be an independent fund for supporting the media with clear, transparent standards. And there are experiences even for the Arab world in Morocco and Tunisia that we should follow suit. The last point about the pandemic. First, the defense order, especially number 8, has affected the freedom of the media, limiting the freedom of journalists and the right to work and to cover all the
انه الهيئه هيئه
You
الاعلام
know that the media association gave permits, but we wish that the parameters would be clear, announced, and transparent, not that we give 70 or 60%. I believe that they should have given to all permits. That's for one. Number two, it should be on also for freelance journalists who don't have a chance. And there are experiences in this respect. Many print houses were not permitted. Also, the right to access to information, they were not permitted during the first months, and there were a lot of declarations given by officials. They were not published. Everything disappeared except COVID-19 information. So access to information still suffering under COVID-19. I will stop here, and I would like to thank you and for people who are following us on Zoom and on Facebook. We shall receive your comments and we shall receive your questions if there's time. But before that, I would give now the floor to Mr. Muhammad Tishat. He's more knowledgeable about the legal issues. And now journalists are suffering from the high fines they're imposing on them. Thank you, and good morning to all of you. I wanted to participate in this acts of legislations in this report. And I wanted to participate based on my experience during the past 20 years and to see the volume of development on these laws and legislations and how were they used. In general, these legislations dealt, the different governments dealt with these legislations in a continuous amendment process, especially when the law was enacted in 1998 and then was amended many times, 2003, 2007, 2010, 11, 12, and 15. You had the multimedia law. These legislations, if you link them with the ages of these governments, you will find that every government coming to office would bring its own laws with it, such as especially laws having to do with mass media. This would give you an indicator that these legislations, media legislations, are being put based on changes and not on stability. The stability is the state, the interest of the homeland, the citizen, and the changing one are the government's element, is the government. So these legislations are put based on the changing element and not on the stable one. This shows that there is no vision for this government state to deal with the media in a clear way, in a stable way. I might find some stability in the legislations having to do with the organization of mass media. Yes. And I would start from the Constitution. Uh, According to the Constitution, it states that the freedom of the press uh, mm, stipulated in the constitution that are guaranteed by the legislator has pillars from an constitutional point of view. The first pillar is practicing the media, the journalism, and the freedom to print and to publish. Is it, I mean, guaranteed in the legislations having to do with the media and the press? Yes, this law, this freedom is guaranteed for the time being. We have a huge number of sites, media sites. There are no limitations, restrictions, such as financial ones as it used to be in the past. In the multimedia law, the conditions are, I mean, logical. Number of FM radios and TVs are growing. There are some practices to limit some of the procedures, but that does not is not, I mean, a serious gap. There were some overseeing on the books printed and distributed. This part was deleted, but still about anything being exported to abroad as books, this is still under surveillance, but it does not go beyond the 2% of the books that are restricted or forbidden. And the reasons for that is for extremism or sexual reasons. The practice of journalism, yes, there are some limitations on the practice of journalism according to the law of the union and the press law. Anyone who is not journalist cannot practice journalism, but the practices in practice, they don't apply it strictly. So you will find a lot of journalists who practice journalism without being registered at the Union of Journalists. There were 10 years ago, actually, or 12 years ago, there were some tendencies to, I mean, sue some of these journalists who practice journalism without being registered. There are some cases already registered. That is the first pillar about practicing journalism. The second one is the right to obtain the information, to access to information. The right to access to information as a legal person, I see it as such. At the origin is that the access to information should be the, I mean, the right and sound process, and the limitation is the exception. About military issues, we're talking about the military plans, I mean arms and the military force of the state. There are some states even jumped over that, but still suffers. These states, they suffer from the dissemination of their military secrets. Number two, about the diplomatic, economical, and the sovereign position of the state. If you preserve data information about these four, positions, we are still not deviating from any international parameters about the issue of freedom to access to information. But if you implement these parameters on our law, we find that they are there, but still they are some exaggeration in what concerns the exceptions about the access to information. There is, as I said, exaggeration. I believe that the practices nowadays are a positive step forward in some of the institutions and ministries of having, an officer data and also a register for access to information. This is a positive step forward, but we should go even for the better in what concerns these practices. Also, where is the judiciary in what concerns the access to information? They are now knowledgeable about the fact that there is an impediment facing journalists about the access to information. Many of the law about the decisions taken by the courts is that, well, the journalist had enough information and he was sure about this information and he dealt accordingly. And he deals with this issue as an impediment that faces the freedom to access to information based on these laws. The law for access to information needs to be amended. Yes, it needs to be amended. It's not now to discuss these amendments, but the law is there at the parliament and we should, develop it. The mechanism of developing it, I will explain it with the third pillar is about how to develop the laws and regulations. We spoke about freedom to access to information, freedom to print. Now the third one is about the punishment uh, department or pillar. The vision of the state and what concerns this freedom of access to information is limited by these punishments imposed on journalists. Is there any problem at the level of the law, print law? No. Is there a problem at the level of the multimedia law concerning these punishments? The answer is no. But there are some remarks that I was adopting 10 years ago, which are that there are terms that are in some of the texts, they are so flexible, these terms. But during the researches that we've done in order to analyze tendencies of dealing with these issues of media by the courts, we found that the judiciary dealt with these texts that are obscure, and he has explained clearly and he has interpreted them by giving a higher ceiling to freedom of journalism in the light of the decisions taken by these courts. But where resides the problem? Clearly speaking, is about the diversity of the laws, punishment laws that the journalism is subjected to. There is a problem at the level of Article 11, also about, combating terrorism and extremism, also other laws or texts. Well, we are enumerating all these problems, but let's see what are the reasons behind all that. The reasons maybe are due to the fact that the law, Jordanian law, having to do with organizing the freedom of the press, in my opinion, the Jordanian legislator has organized this job and through, I mean, these texts, punishment texts. That's why you find that these text defining non-credibility and credibility is a problem, constitute a problem. So the legislator should get out of the fact that, well, I don't want to organize these job of journalists. Where are their tools to organize things? You have, I mean, a self organization, and you have a council for that. You can do that without them. And the second question is why I said that there's no problem in what concerns these laws, publish and multimedia law and journalism law. Well, because these texts were used to be sent to all the stakeholders, journalists, some district attorneys and journalists and lawyers. So there was a committee, a national steering committee was listening to them. This is not our problem. When the law about for combating terrorism and also cyber crimes, we haven't found the stakeholders participating. None was participating in this enactment of these texts. So the legislator has put these texts to organize the essence of this law, and they did not take in their account that journalists will suffer from this. But on practically speaking, journalists, yes, suffered really from these laws and were affected by them. Where reside the solutions? Should I cancel the defamation? I mean, Article 11 dealt with it. No, I cannot, I mean, cancel it. I have to keep, I mean, this right of people who are victims, defamation. The issue is not the incrimination, but the timing is the problem. I believe that there are two main problems that the journalists suffer from. The indemnity and the amounts of indemnity. The decisions of imprisonment, I haven't seen in my research any journalist who was, I mean, from 2002 or before, imprisoned, maybe 2 or 3 were imprisoned. And when we have analyzed, I mean, the crime as such, well, we discovered that yes, it was valid. But the issue is not about this punishment, but is the arrest of these journalists and also the indemnities that the journalist, I mean, should get. It should pay. Sorry, should pay. It is an extremely heavy, I mean, burden on journalists. Sometimes they have to pay tens of thousands of JDs. They might be arrested for 1 week, but they have to pay tens of thousands of indemnity to this have to be discussed, has to be discussed with the judges, how to amend these laws. In the labor law, there is a ceiling for indemnities. Okay, the legislator can define a ceiling for that. So there's nothing forbidding that. Finally, within this study, there are texts based on obscurity. They are obscure, and we don't have a problem at the level of special laws having to do with the media. But today we're witnessing uh, that there are texts in many laws that the press suffer from. We have to revisit them, but how to amend these texts, it shouldn't be done based on the previous methodology. It was based on then on the imposing themselves. Everyone wanted to impose his opinion. The journalists, the judges, the MPs, the government, everyone wanted to impose his own opinion, because I believe that the state is the one who suffers the most. When the press is weakened, the state is then also weakened. We have to revisit these laws in Jordan, and to balance between freedom and responsibility that we're all asking for. Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. Thank you also to all of you. Maybe it's good. Let's go and speak for 1 minute or 2 minutes about the indicator, and then open floor for questions and answers. As you can see on our site, you can open the site, and you have here the links. You have an executive summary, the indicators for the six, different axes. You have here the questions, the quotes, etc. And I want to say that the indicator wanted to listen to the government opinion. So you can see here that the portparole of the government, the Minister of Information, has commented some of these points. You will see here questions that were addressed to them, and they preferred to answer in writing. We wanted to sit with them and to discuss things, but the time was limited. Also, all what people said when after participating in three workshops in this respect, there were also interviews. We will go back to these statements, and we might add some full interviews that were done with these participants. So this indicator will be submitted to updating because it's a text, existing one, and people can provide their comments and develop. And we shall work on 2021 version starting from now. And there will be other continuous sessions and the continuous appraisal. This is what we wanted to show to you. I wish that you can visit it. Give us your comments about it. Maybe there's a point that we did not, mention myself or my colleague Muhammad, that the decisions or the orders of non-publication. When he was appointed director of Media Association, he has stopped these orders. And it was an important and courageous decision. After that, still these orders of non-publication were issued by the judiciary. We understand that they might issue such decisions, but they should be compatible with the law and defined in cases such as, minutes of interrogation or but we don't understand why they have expanded this practice, anything having to do with a case, a given case. Some number two, after freeing uh, journalist by district attorney, we noticed that this journalist was sent back uh, uh, to prison by the governor. We shall open the floor now for questions and answers. Shall start from here, and then we'll take from Zoom questions. Microphone, please. What is your message today to the government? What is your message to the government or recommendation to the government concerning the arrest of a journalist? We've seen that last week there was a journalist arrested on the International Day of Journalism. So in this report, are you mentioning anything about it? Muhammad said it, and I will repeat, say 114, Article 114, it is an exceptional process, the arrest, and under 114 article, the provisions don't permit the arrest of journalists. And what's happening, and we said it years ago, that this is not only bad to the to Jordan's image on the International Day of Journalism. You arrest a journalist, he won't flee away. He won't, I mean, have an impact on the investigation. Uh, uh, there should be a political will. If not, this will remain. There are three things that I like most in this respect. The arrest, also the access to information, and the restriction of publication. I believe, practically speaking, it has to do with our cultural, I mean, heritage. Who publishes such decisions? It's based on our, as I said, historical heritage. It preserves the right of reputation. If we're speaking about these defamation crimes, preserve the highest interest of the state and to preserve the homelands. I mean, also image, this is great, but to apply it where it shouldn't be applied, this causes unfairness. The civil servant, he has this historical, I mean, heritage. He doesn't give any information. He doesn't want to give any information. He believes that he shouldn't, I mean, open and give this information to citizens who ask for. Uh, Also, the non-publication, also those who are behind that, they apply this historical heritage. The text, while the provisions are clear enough in this respect, also the recipient of this decision, he believes I was all the time talking and explaining what is meant by that. And what is meant by that is this or that, and that you can publish this or that, and you cannot publish this or that. There is also a cultural heritage in this respect. The issue of arrest, it's a general problem. It's not only for citizens, for journalists. It is a general problem in what concerns this, punishment. I have to punish you in order to alleviate the case. With all my due respect to the district attorneys and with all my respect to the judiciary, we're just giving our opinion, and we have to preserve the protection of these legal decisions, but we can explain and I mean they say that such laws are not compatible with legal provisions. We're ready after this report to discuss and to enter into a dialogue because we have introduced recommendations under each section. We shall submit them to the government, to the parliament in order and the CSOs to discuss them because change needs a lot of effort. Mr. Khadr, go ahead. If there's anyone who wishes to intervene from Zoom, uh, tell me, please. Mr. Khadr, go ahead. Hello, everyone. Uh, my question has more than one part. About the result, I believe that the result was a little bit scary. This freedom is totally restricted. Is it, a deja vu about this indicator, and is it compatible with international reports that were published and these defense orders, did they have any role in this respect? Are they going to be better or not? We don't know.
Actually, we or actually our report is much more optimistic than the international reports. And it says that we are a restricted environment. In the international reports, they are an environment that is not free. It's not that big of a difference because whoever has given us this advantage are theoretical indicators on the issue of constitutions. And on the issue of violations, historically wise, Jordan did not register any killings, any kidnapping, and any forced disappearance. This is very important in terms of the indicators. If had we given them the same weights, things would be even better. But we are dealing with the reality. So the advantage of this indicator over the international indicator is that it does take into consideration the details of the national landscape, meaning it poses the detailed questions that the international organizations omit to ask them, because the international organizations do not go into this depth of the Jordanian society. As has been said yesterday by our colleague, we're all one family. When I am sitting to write the report, I would be an eyewitness of a part of a story that has extended for more than 30 years. When I say they interfere, yes, they do. When I say they don't interfere, that means they do not interfere. So this is the issue. The defense orders, even without the defense orders, we do not need defense orders. The young men and young women are all following the same line, so we do not need defense orders. And also the defense order number 8, it's actually not that needed and has only been used for Faris Asayah and Ruya and Muhammad Al Khaldi, meaning that it has caused an environment of fear more than it has been applied. Even if they remove it now, no one is going to deviate. As I said, the internal organization of the media institution is the one that somehow sets the tone and sets the details. So no need for all of the other issues. The self-censorship that we're talking about, you do know that the self-control in Jordan exceeds 90% among the journalists. And I always recall the first time we have posed this question 15 years ago, the result was 95 point something. The late Fahd El Fanek has written an article in Iran newspaper in which he said that the result is wrong. The self-censorship is 100%, and the 5% did not understand the question. So you do have a prior censorship or control that takes place by the editors in chief and the rest by the journalists. It's not just fear. When a journalist knows that his media outlet or institution will no longer be defending him if he was causing issues. And what is even more important, he looks at his colleagues or her colleagues that are progressing as the ones that are the closer to the line, they are the ones that keep in line with the government's policy for the containment policy, etc. So these are the technical details that we should be raising. I just have a comment regarding the legislations and the defense law. The issue of Farid Saikh was before the issuance of the Defense Order number 8. The Defense Order number 8, the provision it has regarding the exaggeration in the publication of the news and the criminalization of any exaggeration. I believe that as a man of the law working in this field, that this does not restrict, and I did say more than once that the problem is not in this provision, it's just a normal provision. There are stronger even provisions in the other laws, but repeat and say that within the scope of legislations, concluding the results in the manner that Mr. Nizam is describing, that it's difficult. Maybe he might be talking about the personal experience about the journalistic work in the field, but in terms of legislations, things are slightly different. We cannot be conclusive regarding the results in terms of the legislation, except with legal dimensions that would interpret and explain the existing legal provisions, and so that they would be explained based on independent jurisprudence and with the analysis of judicial decisions. And in my opinion, I believe that all the practices pre or before entering the courtroom do not actually serve a purpose. But what counts would be the evidences you have before you as a journalist, and the evidences that you have and your sources and the strength of the expression from the strength of the evidence that you have. If you have a strong evidence, then it's fine. Is there, are there different crimes and how many judgments have been rendered towards these defamation crimes? I would say not more than 1 or 2% because the law has taken into account the right to critique if there is no intention to commit a crime. So when it comes to legislations, in my opinion, there should be a new product, meaning that uh, after 20 years now we have researchers to see what's happening, but things are slightly different. Everyone should be engaged in it. I see engagements on the TV, like Hal, etc. Why wouldn't there be engagements by you in the legal research where you would provide that to the House representatives? Maybe that is board of the Center for the Protection of Freedom of Journalists. Maybe they're just for the stop. Maybe we are still in the same place. I'm asking everyone to present something new because media is important to all of us. There should be a research-based, a scientific, recent approach. The same people, the same people are the same people that keep on talking. There should be a new experience for newly active people other than us, other than Nidal, other than the CDFG. Thank you. Does anyone have anything else to say? Go ahead, please introduce yourself. Hello, I am from Al Sabeel newspaper. The biggest problems that the journalists face is the right to access information. This is one of the very important problems. It's true that you, as a journalist, you subject yourself to self-censorship because of the laws and regulations. When we talk to an official or with a spokesperson, and Mr. Nadarad spoke about the importance of having spokespeople, you find that the spokesperson himself has self-censorship, and you find that he is concerned, he's apprehensive. We do not know what makes this person or the spokesman fearful to speak. As an example to that, I contacted the head of the National Center for Human Rights. He was afraid to give any statement. He said, I'm targeted, and he was fearful to say anything. He would transfer me to a second employee. I want to transfer to the third, to the fourth, and they all procrastinate. And when they respond with fear. So what is the reason behind that? My dear friend, well, I believe that the right of access to information has been well discussed. We did say that the law does not support the right to access information. We said that there are so many issues in this respect, but you spoke about aspects that relate to the structure of the institutions. The law should stipulate the protection of the spokespeople. The other important matter as well. The other important matter that we should talk about is the enforcement of the law on the ground. Do you believe that there are spokespeople and a network of spokespersons? Most of them do not speak because the minister does not give authorities. The minister does not like the press or prevent him or is afraid from accountability or the Secretary General. We spoke about training and we spoke about all the developments that occur in the social media. We look at the website of the institution. There's no pre-disclosure. Even when the minister has been replaced, they still have the pictures of the former minister. So the issue of fear is related to the fact that the principle that Mr. Muhammad has raised is that they believe that they own the information and that they're not just trusted with it. This is a national wealth for the society and for the state and not for the minister. Therefore, you'll find someone who tries to manipulate everything or monopolize everything. And this is what we hope that now in the era of the revolution of communication and the clubhouse, etc., they believe that they can prohibit the information or prevent the information. And this is disastrous when you say that you're preventing the national media from coverage and you're telling them you're not allowed to write anything about issues that relate to public opinion, and they lose their credibility and they somehow burn the bridges with the people and while the whole world is writing right and left and so much information is flooding the world, while the press we cannot hear, we cannot see, we cannot talk. We have Ms. Halib, the assessment of international reports of Jordan's situation as being not free. Is this considered an exaggerated response? Exaggeration? I always say that we must learn from the international reports and benefit from them and to take them and study them, whether we agree with them or disagree with them. The methodologies sometimes differ. The methodology differs. The methodologies for constructing the indicators differ. But I have never belied any international reports, or did I say this or that? We did say why it appeared to be restricted and not free. If it were to happen, for God forbid, that severe violations were to occur, then we would become not just not free, it would become worse. Go ahead, Mr. Muhammad. Based on my personal experience,
There are some international reports building on indicators. So there are mistakes, yes, at this level. First of all, they don't interpret all the legal text, and sometimes the interpretation is done wrongly. Practical experiences on these legal texts are not reflected on the essence of this report. This legislation point, there are some reports depending on some cancelled texts, some wrongly translated texts, some on some wrong results based on these wrong texts. and they don't know how they're being implemented on the ground. There are some reports, I believe, yes, there were mistakes, and even some of them were so important. That's why we said that what I mean distinguishes our indicator is that it takes into account all the details having to do with the scenery in what concerns the legislation, the political scene, the parliament, etc. All the details that they don't see, or they're not concerned by looking into all its details because they are assessing in general things. I would like to thank you all the participants here present at the center, our center, CDFG, colleagues, MPs, legal people, Mr. Mohammed Tishat. Also, I would like to thank my colleagues at the CDFG who worked during the past months, the Mr. Islam, Mr. Siba, Mr. Hamad Ghanem, Mr. Haytham, all the team who has worked seriously so this report would be, present and available. And I repeat and say that this report might have gaps, mistakes, pros, points of strength, points of weaknesses, but it's a trial to present a roadmap. All stakeholders could sit together in order to discuss them, the restricted media, and this is a new publication of the DFG about this indicator of press freedom in Jordan. We hope that next year things would be better, and I hope that the title would be Free Press in Jordan. We will be most happy to see that. We don't have any interest, not at all, that this media would stay still. We have for sure this will to have a political and a legal reform that would be reflected on the freedom of the press. And we thank all those who followed us on Facebook, on Zoom. Thank you all, and we will stay serving this cause. Thank you. Thank you, Muhammad.
خذ يا بيك يا بيك يا بيك خذ هذا إلك هدية هذا إلك هدية لا بعت لك روابط بس هذا كيفك على الموقع
بس ملخص
كامل بس راح يخضع لبعض شوية تعديلات فيه.
طيب تمام
طيب بس بدي ياكل في دقيقة هلا كيف حالك؟ مسيو
اسمع وانا كمان والله بدي قاعدة هيك
بعد العيد بلكي فتحوا الكلب نروح نشرب لنا شغلة بس
انا ما بشرب
بس